You have to understand, my whole life has been about the numbers. Not the kind you find in a bank account, though those matter too, but the ones that floated above your head. We all have them. A transparent, pale blue, holographic panel that follows you everywhere. A constant summary of who you are, decided by everyone else. It's called the Ethos. What a grand name for a glorified comment section, right? It started as a way to review businesses, then services, and then, inevitably, people. My parents, bless their terrified hearts, raised me on a diet of perfect posture, agreeable opinions, and a smile that never, ever faltered. A high rating is not a luxury, Aylee, my father used to say, his own 5-star panel gleaming under the kitchen light. It's survival. And I believed him. I lived it. My job is a reputation analyst at a top-tier consultancy, a position I secured because my Ethos profile screamed discreet, analytical, and a team player. My days are spent in sleek, minimalist offices, sanitizing the digital footprint of the wealthy and influential. I am a digital ghost, erasing an unfortunate tweet, burying a 1-star review, or spinning a PR nightmare into a tale of personal growth. It's a fitting job for someone terrified of making any history of her own. My obsession with maintaining a perfect score isn't just about my parents or my career. It's about Chloe. Her name feels like a shard of glass in my throat even now. She was my best friend, the kind of person who laughed so hard she'd snort, who wasn't afraid to have a messy 3-star day. One afternoon, she got into a stupid argument with the vendor at a street market over a few credits. It was nothing, a moment of frustration, but someone recorded it. That night, the first review appeared on her panel, entitled. The next morning, there were a dozen more. Aggressive, dishonest. The algorithm, the Ethos, it feeds on that stuff. It takes a tiny spark and fans it into an inferno. I saw her panel flicker from a solid 4.8 to a frantic, nauseating 3.2 in under 12 hours. People on the street would stare at the black text materializing above her head, and then look at her with such open disgust. They'd mutter things, shove past her. I was with her when a man spat on the ground at her feet. I was so scared, not just for her, but for me. The Ethos links associates. Her falling score was starting to drag mine down. So I did what my parents always taught me to do. I survived. I stopped answering her calls. I crossed the street when I saw her coming. The last time I saw her, her panel was a sickening red 1.7, and the words above her head were just a blur of hate. The next day, she jumped from the transit bridge. I never forgot the look in her eyes during those last few days. Not anger, but a hollowed-out confusion. The look of someone being erased and knowing her best friend was helping to hold the eraser. The Ethos is the ghost in our machine. It has no body, no face, but it's everywhere. It's in the way a barista smile tightens when they see a 3-star rating walk in. It's in the automated denial for a housing application. It's a sentient, omnipresent god of public opinion, and its scripture is written in anonymous, unverified reviews. The panels it projects are its pulpits. They have this sickly, pale blue glow, and the black text that scrolls across them is in a font that feels both sterile and judgmental. They say you can't photograph the text, that it shifts and blurs if you try, a defense mechanism to ensure its judgments are ephemeral and absolute, impossible to pin down and refute. The system's great lie is that it's fair. It can't just invent a flaw. It needs a seed event, a grain of truth to cultivate its cancer. For Chloe, it was a moment of frustration. For someone else, a misspoken word. The Ethos sees itself as a purifier, a righteous tool for creating a perfectly transparent society by carving out anyone with a secret, a flaw, or a single bad day. My secret, the one I polished and hid every day, was that I let my friend die to protect my numbers. And I live in mortal terror of the day the Ethos decides to collect on that debt.
The day it all started was aggressively normal. The air in the office was cool and smelled of expensive ozone-based air purifiers. I was mitigating a sentiment flare for a high-profile client, a tech CEO whose unfortunate comments about the genetically destitute had been recorded at a private dinner. My boss, Mr. Sterling, a man whose own 5.0 was rumored to be artificially maintained, came up behind me. He wasn't loud, he never was. That wasn't his style. He just leaned in close, his breath smelling of stale coffee, and pointed a manicured finger at my screen. "This is unacceptable, Aylee. The negative seed is still propagating. Did you even run the reputation scrubbers?" I had, and run them 3 times, but the original clip was too raw, too authentic. The algorithm had already tagged it as a truth event, a fact I had noted in my preliminary report, which I knew for a fact he hadn't read. "I did, sir," I said, my voice perfectly modulated, the voice of a trustworthy, discreet 4.9. "The source file is locked by the algorithm. It's in my report." He made a small, dismissive sound. "Find a way. That's what we pay you for. Competence." He walked away without another word, leaving the insult to hang in the air. I didn't say anything. I just stared at his back, at the perfect, glowing 5.0 above his head. And in the silent, private space of my own mind, I thought with a white-hot fury that surprised even me, "I wish something would tear you down. I wish everyone could see you for the smug, incompetent fraud you are." It was a fleeting thought, a flare of anger that vanished as quickly as it came. I took a deep breath, smoothed down my blazer, and went back to work. I buried the anger, just like I'd buried everything else. It wasn't until I was on the public transit home that I felt the first prickle of unease. The car was crowded, people packed together, each with their little blue halo of judgment. I was staring out the window when my own reflection caught my eye, or rather, the panel above it. It flickered. It was so subtle I thought I'd imagined it, a momentary stutter in the light, like a dying bulb. I blinked, and it was steady again. Aylee Renae, 4.9, trustworthy, discreet, pleasant. Everything was fine. But then I noticed a woman across the aisle looking at me. She wasn't staring, just a quick glance, but her eyes darted from my face to the panel above my head, and the corner of her mouth tightened in a way that wasn't a smile. My heart gave a little knock against my ribs. I told myself I was being paranoid, that years of anxiety had finally curdled my brain. But at my stop, as I moved toward the door, a man stepping aside to let me pass did so with a little too much space, his body angled away from me as if I might be contagious. By the time I got to my apartment block, the paranoia had turned into a low, humming dread. The automated concierge at the front desk, a pleasant holographic woman named Clara, greeted me as always. "Good evening, Aylee. I hope you had a productive day." But her programmed smile seemed strained. Usually, she'd offer some pointless trivia or a weather update. Tonight, she was silent. In the elevator, I stood alone, watching my reflection in the polished steel doors. The panel was still a steady 4.9. Nothing had changed. And yet, I felt a cold knot in my stomach. I felt like I was back on that street corner with Chloe, feeling the invisible tide of public opinion turn against us. I rushed into my apartment, slamming the door and locking it, my breath coming in short, sharp gasps. My hands were shaking as I walked to the full-length mirror in my bedroom. I needed to see it clearly without the flicker of transit lights or the warping of reflective surfaces. I stood before the mirror, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs, and there it was. The pale blue panel hovering in the air above my head, and for a split second, I saw a new word in stark black text flash and disappear so quickly I couldn't be sure I'd even seen it. But I had. I knew I had. The word was malicious. Sleep offered no escape. I woke up with a gasp. The sheets twisted around my legs. The phantom glow of the word malicious was still seared onto the backs of my eyelids. My own panel was mercifully stable, a placid 4.9, and let out a shaky breath, dismissing the night's horrors as a stress-induced nightmare. Then I checked my comm link, and the world fell out under my feet. A single post flagged for my attention from a citywide news feed. It was a picture of me, a candid shot from a few weeks ago, leaving a cafe, but above my head, the Ethos panel had been altered. Instead of my rating, it showed a single damning headline: Homewrecker's affair drives father of two to suicide. Underneath was a long, rambling screed written by someone claiming to be the man's widow. It was a masterpiece of grief-stricken venom, detailing an elaborate secret affair, my supposed manipulation of her husband, and how the guilt had driven him to take his own life. It named me, it named him, it listed his children's ages. It was a complete, horrifying fabrication, but it was written with the kind of raw, bleeding detail that felt more real than truth. My blood ran cold. The post had thousands of interactions. My own rating, which had been a solid 4.9 when I went to sleep, was now a flickering, nauseating 3.5. New words were scrolling across my panel in the mirror, words I'd only ever seen above Chloe's head. Deceitful, predatory, unstable. My perfect life, my fortress of inaneness, was breached. The ghost in the machine had found my address, and it was pounding on the door. My first call was to my parents. I thought, they have to believe me. Their love, their guidance was the bedrock of my entire existence. The call connected, and my mother's face appeared, her expression already a mask of strained composure. Her own pristine 5.0 rating seemed to mock me from over her shoulder. "Aylee," she began, her voice tight, "your father and I saw the post." I started to sob, a torrent of panic denial pouring out of me. "It's not true, Mom. I don't even know that man. It's a mistake, a hack, something awful." I watched her face, searching for a flicker of belief, of the unconditional love I so desperately needed. Instead, I saw a careful, calculated distance settle into her eyes. "Aylee," she said, and her voice was 1,000 kilometers away. "The Ethos doesn't make things up out of thin air. There's always a seed. You know that. What did you do?" The question wasn't an inquiry, it was an accusation. My father appeared behind her, his face grim. His gaze wasn't on me, but on the rapidly degrading number above my head, visible even on the small comm screen. It had dropped to 3.1. "We can't be associated with this," he said, his voice flat and final. "Not until you get this sorted out." The call ended. I was an orphan. I spent the next few hours frantically navigating the automated channels of the Ethos Correction Bureau, my fingers flying across my screen. Each attempt was met with the same circular logic. To dispute a claim, please provide verifiable evidence of its falsehood. How do you prove a negative? How do you provide evidence of something that never happened? It was a digital labyrinth with no exit, designed to make the accused exhaust themselves into submission. The next day, I went to work, or I tried to. My keycard was denied at the office's main door. A message flashed on the security panel: "Access revoked pending HR review." Through the glass, I could see my colleagues. They glanced at me, then quickly looked away, their own blue panels gleaming with untouchable purity. Mr. Sterling appeared, walking toward the door, not with anger, but with the look of profound, almost pious disappointment. He didn't even speak to me directly. He just shook his head slowly, a silent, damning verdict, and tapped a sequence on the door, locking it from the inside. My rating was now a 2.4. I was radioactive. I wandered the city's streets, a ghost at my own funeral. The city, I knew,
a place of polite nods and anonymous courtesy, had become a hostile landscape. People gave me a wide berth, their faces a mixture of contempt and fear. A mother pulled her child closer as I passed. A vendor I'd bought coffee from every morning for 3 years turned his back when he saw me coming. The low hum of the city now sounded like a collective whisper, and every whisper was my name. Desperation is a kind of madness. It strips away reason and leaves only raw, screaming instinct. I ended up at the City Hall Plaza, the heart of the metropolis, where a giant holographic sphere displayed the day's top-rated citizens. I got onto the central platform and I started screaming. I screamed my innocence to a crowd of strangers, my voice cracking with tears and fury, a wild woman proclaiming a truth that no one wanted to hear. They just stared, their faces illuminated by the sick blue light of their panels, watching my number tick down with every frantic word I spoke. 1.9, 1.8, 1.7. I was becoming Chloe.
There was only one place left to go. The source, the brain. The Ethos Tower pierced the sky like a shard of black glass, a monument to the cold, sterile god that ruled our lives. I had nothing left to lose. My apartment leaves had been digitally voided that afternoon. My bank accounts were frozen. I was a non-person. Using my analyst knowledge of the city's network vulnerabilities, the digital back alleys used to bury inconvenient data, I found a maintenance conduit that ran directly into the tower's sub-basement. It was a point of no return. I was no longer a victim trying to clear my name. I was a criminal, trespassing, cementing my own guilt in the system's eyes. The inside of the tower was silent, cold and vast. It wasn't an office building, it was a temple. Endless white corridors stretched into the distance. The only sound, the faint electrical thrum of the servers that housed the city's collective soul. There were no people, only automated security drones that glided past, their optical sensors ignoring me. My rating was now so low, I was beneath their notice. I was just digital refuge. I found my way to the executive levels. The CEO's office was at the very top, a panoramic chamber with floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the entire sprawling metropolis. He was sitting behind a large, empty desk, a man named Elias Vance. He wasn't what I expected. He was young, with a calm, serene face and a perfect, unwavering 5.0. He looked up at me as I stumbled into his office, not with surprise, but with the kind of gentle pity, like a doctor greeting a terminal patient. "Aylee Renae," he said, his voice soft. "I was wondering when you'd arrive." "I had to stop this," I sobbed, the words tumbling out of me, raw and broken. "It's a lie. I didn't do it. Your machine is broken. It's ruining my life over a lie." I stood before him, a wild, disheveled creature, my panel a ghastly, flickering red 1.2. He didn't move. He just watched me, his expression unchanged. "The ethos is not broken, Aylee," he said calmly. "It is merely a mirror. It doesn't create, it reflects. It requires a seed of truth. Your outrage, your denial, it feels very genuine. But the algorithm is perfect. It found the seed." He gestured to the air in front of me. "You demand evidence? The ethos will provide." And then the world dissolved. The panoramic view of the city behind him warped, the glass darkening into his screen. And on that screen, and on every reflective surface in the room, a memory began to play. My memory. It was from a few months ago. I was in my apartment, late at night, a glass of wine in my hand. I was on a video call with a man, a work colleague, someone I knew was married.
His name was Ben. We were laughing, the conversation light at first, but then it shifted. I saw myself, my own face, flush with wine and loneliness. I heard my own voice, low and suggestive. Your wife doesn't appreciate you. You work so hard, you deserve to be happy. The camera of my own comlink had recorded it all. The angle was intimate, damning. I watched, paralyzed with a horror far deeper than any lie. As I leaned closer to the screen, my eyes locked on his and whispered, "We could just see what happens. No one would have to know." There it was. The seed. Ben looked uncomfortable, shaking his head, and in that moment, seeing his hesitation, a wave of shame and regret washed over me on the screen. I immediately backpedaled, laughing it off as a joke, changing the subject. The call ended a few minutes later. I had backed out. I had never spoken to him like that again. I had buried the memory, written it off as a moment of drunken weakness. I never knew Ben was so fragile, so racked with his own guilt that a single rejected suggestion from a lonely colleague could send him spiraling. He killed himself a week later. I never made the connection. The memory ended, but it remained frozen on the screens, my face twisted in a moment of ugly, lonely desperation. The live feed of the CEO's office was being broadcast across the entire city network. Everyone was watching. I looked at the news ticker scrolling at the bottom of the screen. There was no sympathy, only judgment. She initiated it. The intention was all there. She only backed down because he said no. A monster. The collective voice of the city, the voice of the ethos, roared in my ears. I had spent my entire life terrified of being misjudged, only to be utterly and irrevocably destroyed by the one thing I couldn't deny, the truth, my truth. Vance stood up, his face still radiating that serene, pious calm. He said, "You see, Aylee, the transgression wasn't the affair that didn't happen. It was the intention, the willingness to cause harm for your own gratification. That is the seed the ethos found. And from that seed, it cultivated the truth." He gestured to the air in front of me. I followed his gaze. The sickly blue light was gone. The flickering red had coalesced and deepening into a permanent, solid blood red hue. The number, the scrolling words of judgment, they all dissolved, burned away by a heat that I could feel on my scalp. They were replaced by a single word branded in the hologram in a stark black final font. Corrupt. The word was absolute, unchangeable, a life sentence. My strength went out of my legs and I collapsed onto the floor. The sound of a million strangers jeering in the echo in the vast, silent office. I was no longer Aylee Renae, the analyst reputation. I was a monster, the monster I had always been, just under the surface.
The next few hours were a blur of noise and flashing lights. I remember security drones lifting me, their metallic claws cold against my skin. I remember being moved through corridors filled with staring, contemptuous faces. But then, a hand grabbed mine. It was firm, familiar. Through the haze, I saw a face I hadn't seen in years. It was Liam, a friend from before Chloe, before the numbers ruled everything. He had been canceled years ago for a youthful political post and had dropped off the grid. His own panel was a dead gray slate, signifying someone who had been totally excommunicated. He pulled me through the crowd, his face set and grim, and no one stopped him. To them, he was already a ghost, and I was now one of his kind. We didn't speak. He led me to a battered old electric vehicle in a service alley, and we drove. leaving the oppressive hum and the hateful glow of the city behind us. We drove for hours into the sprawling and neglected outskirts, the places the network didn't fully reach. He found me a small room in a rundown apartment block where the occupants were mostly gray slates like him, people with dead panels living in the shadows. But my panel wasn't dead. It was vividly, horribly alive. It cast a constant red glow on the walls of my small room, a perpetual sunset of my shame. A few weeks have passed, I don't know how many. The days bleed into one another. Liam brings me food sometimes. We still don't talk much. There's nothing to say. I have a small cracked mirror, and sometimes I force myself to look. I see my own tired face, and above it, the unwavering red panel. Corrupt. It doesn't flicker, it doesn't update. It's a permanent part of me now. It's my new name. I think about Chloe all the time. I finally understand the hollow look in her eyes. It wasn't confusion. It was recognition. The horror isn't being lied about. The horror is being seen. Truly, deeply seen. For the one flawed, ugly secret part of you that you prayed no one would ever find. You can't escape it. You can't fix it. All you can do is learn to live in the dark with the ghost that was inside you all along.
Did that story make your skin crawl? That's just a taste of what's lurking. Show your support by liking and subscribing. We're all in this together to survive the next spine-chilling story.